Finally, the character we have been waiting for is here. Yes, the Herta is one of the characters that most players are looking forward to in version 3.0. Well, actually, the weight of most players for this character is not without foundation. This is because the Herta has a very unique kit and is included in a very tough Erudition character that is predicted to be used universally, not just focusing on pure fiction. Another thing that is quite interesting about this character is that the Herta has a kit that is a bit similar to Acheron, who needs other Erudition characters to be able to maximize her kit. Actually, there are many other things we need to discuss about the Herta. So without further ado, I'm Hoyostation and we are going to discuss more about the ultimate guide of the Herta version 3.0. Let's do this! Do you have a character or weapon in the game that you really want but you don't have enough stellar jades? Here's a smarter way to recharge your favorite games like Genshin Impact and Hoyostation. Look no further than Loot Bar. Loot Bar is the most reliable top-up platform. It saves up to 20% for all orders compared with the official channel, and it provides an 80% off for your first purchase. It's 100% safe as you will only be using your UID. We will buy pack for 3,000 stellar jades for $42, which otherwise would have costed $50. Totally saving $7.5. We received the crystals we purchased in the less than 3 minutes. All recharges will be done through the official channel with miHoyo, which allows you to enjoy all top-up offers. Ready to level up your gaming experience? Check the link in the description to get the amazing discount. Okay, as usual, before we go deeper into her kits, let's talk about her base stats first. As you can see, the Herta has quite interesting base stats if we do a comparison with characters that have the same path. Jade, for example. The Herta has a much better HP, a slightly higher attack status, but has a slightly lower speed. Well, this is quite understandable considering she is an Erudition character that focuses on area attacks. Now, one thing you need to know from these basic stats is that the Herta has a very high ultimate capacity, which is 220 points. This is much higher than almost all of the characters in the Honkai Star Rail, which only have an average of 150 energy. Even though she has a large energy capacity, it doesn't mean that it's difficult to issue her ultimate. It just has a different way of getting energy than the current units. So instead of being curious, let's talk about it. First, we will discuss her skill called Big Brain Energy. This skill will cause ice damage equal to 70% of Herta's attack on the main target and will cause a debuff called Interpretation. Then it will deal 70% of Herta's attack to the main target and surrounding targets again, and this lasts for 2 times. Now, if you have trouble interpreting the effect of this skill, I quite understand. The description is a bit confusing, right? Therefore, I will give you an estimate of the damage that will be caused by a diagram that you can see on your screen. Essentially, Herta deals 210% damage to the main target, 140% damage to surrounding targets, and 70% damage to enemies on the far left and far right on the enemy formation. Now, there are some things you need to keep in mind. This damage scheme only applies if you choose an enemy in the center of the formation. If you choose enemies on the left and right of the formation, your attacks will only target 3 enemies. And lastly, what about the debuff called Interpretation? Interpretation is Herta's main debuff that determines how much damage she deals, which I will explain later in another part of this video, okay? And next, we move on to her ultimate. Herta's ultimate, called Told Ya Magic Happens, has an effect that is quite unique. In addition to the unique effect of this ultimate has several interesting effect parts to discuss. For the first effect, when using this ultimate, the Herta will directly randomize and set the debuff called Interpretation that the enemy has. And from this setting, the debuff called Interpretation will be prioritized to be given to enemies that are elite enemies and above. After that, Herta will deal ice damage equal to 200% of her attack to all existing enemies. And when the ultimate is used, Herta's attack will increase by 80%. Now, there's one thing to note here. The increase in Herta's attack is added when this ultimate deals damage, so it increases the damage it deals. But interestingly, in addition to increasing the damage done by this ultimate, Herta also gets an attack increase buff for 3 turns. Meaning that this extra attack will increase her other attacks as well. Interesting, right? Is that the only effect? Of course not, guys. In addition to the interesting things I just mentioned, after activating this ultimate, Herta will immediately get an extra turn. She will also get 1 stack of Inspiration, which can be stacked up to 4 times. And finally, she will change her skill to an enhanced version, namely Hear Me Out. Okay, next up is another exciting part, which is her enhanced skill called Hear Me Out. Like the skill part, this kit has a pretty similar concept. When she activates this enhanced skill, she will consume 1 stack of inspiration that she gets from her ultimate. She will then deal ice damage equal to 80% of her attack to the selected primary target and produce a debuff called Interpretation. Then she deals backstabbing damage equal to 80% of Herta's attack to that target and twice to the surrounding targets. And finally, she will deal damage equal to 40% of her attack to all enemies. Now, just like in the skill section, I know you must be confused as to what kind of damage calculation this is, right? As you can see on your screen, the damage multiplier that she produces with this enhanced skill actually reaches 280% on the primary target, 200% on the target next to her, and 120% on the target to the far left and far right. Now the same caveat applies to this enhanced skill as well. Namely, the schematic you see is the damage schematic that occurs when you select an enemy in the center of the enemy formation. If you select enemies to the left and right of the formation, your attacks will only target 3 enemies. Do you think this multiplier is low enough for the Herta? Wait a minute, you haven't seen all the potential she has, so let us move on to the next part. Now we come to the interesting part of the kit, which is the talent called Hand Them Over. This talent has a lot of effects. The first is that every time an enemy enters the battle, the Herta will give them 1 stack debuff called Interpretation. And the next effect is that every time a new wave occurs, the Herta will give 25 stacks of Interpretation to random enemies, prioritizing enemies that are elite enemies and above. And when performing an enhanced skill called Hear Me Out, it will deal additional damage if the enemy has a debuff called Interpretation. The additional damage is 8% to the primary target and 4% to the adjacent target. Now, if you have a character with the Erudition path on your team, including the Herta of course, the additional damage will increase by the same amount. Now, this will certainly reminds us of a slightly similar kit, the Acheron kit, which requires us to have Nihilated characters on the same team. However, the fundamental difference between Acheron's kit and Herta's kit is that Acheron requires 2 Nihilated characters other than herself. Meanwhile, Herta needs 2 Erudition characters including herself. It's a small difference, of course. But with this difference, we don't need more Erudition on the team and can use other characters that are more useful. Okay, then for the debuff called Interpretation, it can stack 42 times. However, when using enhanced skills, the debuff called Interpretation owned by the enemy is reset to 1. After the enemy who has this debuff loses or leaves the battle, the Interpretation debuff will be transferred to another enemy, with priority given to enemies who are elite enemies or 1 level above. Okay, if we do a little math here, with the maximum number of debuff Interpretation stacks being 42 stacks, then the additional damage multiplier that we can get to increase the damage from Herta's enhanced skill is 672% if we have 2 Erudition characters in the fight. So if we add it all up, the maximum multiplier we can get from Herta's enhanced skill is 952% for the main target, provided the target has the maximum number of Interpretation stacks. Wow, a lot of damage she does. What do you think? And then we move on to the next part, which is her technique. The technique called Vibe Check has 3 interesting effects for us to discuss. For the first effect, this technique gives the Herta an additional 60% attack when she enters combat, which lasts for 2 turns. Now, uniquely, besides this pretty cool effect, the Herta has a second technique effect that is quite interesting. When this technique is used, it will provide 3 locations of the basic treasure on the map. So for those of you who might still have a lot of basic treasure left in the overworld, this technique is really interesting, right? Apart from the 2 effects I just mentioned, this technique also has a third effect, which is that when this technique is used in the simulated universe or divergent universe, when Herta enters combat, she will deal true damage equal to 99% of the maximum HP of the enemy who is below elite, and true damage equal to 30% of the maximum HP of the enemy who is elite or above. Now, if you are confused, what is true damage? True damage is a new type of damage that exists in version 3.0. What makes true damage different from other damage is that true damage is a type of damage that has no type and is not affected by any effect. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so before we talk about her traces, let's talk about her minor traces. The Herta has some pretty interesting minor traces. She gets an additional 22.4% ice damage, an additional 18% attack, and last one is an additional 5 points of speed. At first glance, these minor traces are quite good and suitable for the Herta, which is a DPS role, especially with the addition of 5 points of speed, making her a character with at least 104 points of total speed from the start. That's pretty good. And finally, we come to her traces, and as usual, there are 3 interesting traces that we will discuss here. For the first trace, called Alovely Honest, when a member of our party attacks an enemy, it will give 1 stack of interpretation debuff to the affected enemy. After the attack, for every 1 target attacked by team members, the Herta will gain 3 energy, with a maximum calculation of 5 targets. Now, I'm sure that from the beginning of the video, many of you were surprised by the Herta's large energy capacity, which reached 220 energy, right? Well, the existence of such a large capacity is not without reason. Even though she has a rather large capacity, she has a kit to get energy in an easy way. With this kit, if there are any characters who make AoE attacks and hit 5 targets, Herta will automatically get an additional 15 energy every time the ally attacks. Pretty good, right? And for the second trace we are going to discuss, it's called Message from Beyond the Veil. If our team has at least 2 characters with the Erudition path when we enter the battle, then all members of our team will get an additional critical damage of 80%. Pretty cool fact indeed. The next effect is that the previous trace, called Alovely Honest, will have a minimum calculation of 3 targets when attacking the enemy, which means that the Herta will get a minimum of 9 energy when a member of our party attacks. In addition, after attacking, she will place 1 stack debuff of interpretation on the enemy target that has the most interpretation debuffs. Now, if the attacking character has an Erudition path, then the enemy will immediately get 3 stacks of interpretation. As for the third trace, called Starved Landscape of Vagua, it also has an effect that is no less interesting. For every 1 stack of interpretation generated to the enemy, the Herta will get 1 stack of answer, which can increase the ultimate attack produced by 1% per stack, and can be stacked up to 99 stacks. Well, do I need to talk about this skill kit? Frankly, this kit is one of the things that makes the Herta's damage even greater. One thing to note is that the calculation of these traces is based on the interpretation debuff generated during the battle, not the debuff interpretation the enemy has at that time. Which means that the longer the battle lasts, the more debuff interpretation calculations will be generated, and that means the damage generated by the Herta's ultimate will be greater. Finally, we come to the discussion of her eidolons. For the first eidolon, Knight at Shorefall, when performing enhanced skills on the enemy, it will provide an additional calculation of 50% of the number of interpretation debuffs on the main target and the target next to it. This means that with the Herta's Eidolon 1, instead of accumulating 42 stacks of interpretation, we only need 28 stacks to achieve maximum damage. In addition, when we use enhanced skill, the stack of interpretation is reset to 15 stacks instead of 1. Interesting, right? As for the second Eidolon, called Wind Through Keyhole, it has a very interesting effect. When the Herta uses her ultimate, the Herta will get an extra stack of inspiration, which means she can perform enhanced skills 2 times in a row. The Herta will also get a 35% action boost after using her enhanced skill. Then for the fourth Eidolon, called the 16th Key, she will increase the speed of all characters on the team with the Erudition path by 12%. Since the Herta requires several Erudition characters on her team, this Eidolon effect will clearly help increase the team's damage output. In addition, the Eidolon's effect also applies to herself. The Herta will get a turn much faster than before. And finally, Sweet Lure of Answer, which is her 6th Eidolon. The effect of this Eidolon is very good, guys, because it dramatically increases the multiplier of her ultimate. The effect of Eidolon 6 will increase resistant penetration by 20%, and if the enemy in the field has a certain amount, it will be able to increase her ultimate damage up to 400%. Pretty sweet, right? Lastly, don't forget that we will be discussing her signature lightcon in this video. The signature lightcon, called Unto the Unreachable Veil, provides a very interesting effect. Not only does this lightcon provide an additional critical rate, but it also provides an additional 60% of damage generated by skills and ultimates when the ultimate is unleashed. Another interesting thing is that when the ultimate is unleashed, if it consumes 140 energy, it restores 1 skill point. Of course, this Lightcon is a very good Lightcon. It has all the bonus effect the Herta needs, and the skill point recovery effect has no cooldown, which means it will be active every time the Herta does an ultimate. Is the Lightcon worth it? Of course it is. Okay, so the next thing we need to discuss is the build of the Herta. As we know, the Herta has a very simple role and mechanic, namely as a DPS character that depends on critical rate and also critical damage. So the best set she can use is a relic that relates to that. Currently, Scholar Lost in Erudition is one of the best relics she can use. The effect of this relic fits perfectly with the Herta's set, as it can increase critical rate by 8% and damage from the ultimate and skills will increase by 20%. After using the ultimate, the damage of the next skill will increase by 25%. Well, if we compare to the Herta set, then we can feel a very big similarity, right? Then we move on to the section of planar ornaments that are suitable for the Herta to use. Currently, there are two sets of pretty good planar ornaments that you can use, namely Izumo Jensei and Takama Divine Realm, and also Taigonia the Unclaimed Desolation. Why are these two planar ornaments good for the Herta? Well, the answer is quite simple, because the Herta will always be paired with other Erudition characters on the team, so the effect of Izumo Jensei will always be active, since that planar ornaments requires characters on the team with the same path. What about Sigonia the Unclaimed Desolation? Honestly, this planar ornament is very good when used in pure fiction mode, since there are a lot of enemies in that mode. The effect of this relic is easy to achieve. In addition, since Herta is a character with the Erudition path, it's very easy to defeat a large number of enemies, which makes this effect even better. Now for the status recommendations that you need to use for the Herta are as follows. What about the Lightcon that's suitable for the Herta? Of course, what is prioritized for the Herta is her signature Lightcon called Unto the Unreachable Veil, which provides a very interesting effect. In addition to the additional critical rate, this Lightcon will also increase the damage generated by skills and ultimates by 60% when the ultimate is unleashed. Another interesting thing is that when you cast the ultimate, if it consumes 140 energy, it will restore 1 skill point. Honestly, if you intend to take the Herta in the next patch, I highly recommend taking this Lightcon because it has a very good effect. However, if you don't want to use this Lightcon, there are several options you can use. For example, Eternal Calculus, which you can easily get from Herta's shop, or Himeko's Night on the Milky Way, which you can buy in the shop, or another Lightcon called Today is Another Peaceful Day, which provides a universal damage increase according to the maximum energy the user has. But even though this Lightcon has a good effect, you can only get it through the Battle Pass. Finally, we come to the last discussion in this video, which is the best characters and teams to pair with the Herta. As we know, the Herta is a character that needs other character with the Erudition path to maximize her kits, so obviously the best characters to pair with her are characters with the Erudition path. The first character that is well suited to be paired with the Herta is none other than Jade. Jade is a character with a sub-DPS role that can help other characters by giving them the Death Collector buff. In addition, when a character with this buff attack enemies in large numbers, her charge stack will quickly increase and she will automatically use her follow-up attack called Fang of Flare Flying more often. Basically, Jade is a very good character to play with the Herta because both of them have kits that can help each other, which makes the combination of these two characters great. The second character that is definitely the best match for the Herta is Himeko. Himeko is actually not that different from Jade. The main difference is that Himeko's charge stack only increases when the enemy's weakness is broken. However, this will feel very easy if you use Himeko in modes that have a large number of enemies, such as Pure Fiction. Also, if you have Fuke in your roster, your Himeko will have a better performance. Okay, for the third character, the best character to team with the Herta is Herta herself. In fact, it will be very funny if we put two types of Herta in the team. But in fact, these two characters are a pretty good combination when paired, guys. When the two characters have the same type, which is Ice, and also the same path, which is Erudition, so the combination between these two characters is very good. On the other hand, these two characters also have kits that can help each other, which makes the Herta even more optimal to use. And the last character that I personally think is perfect for the Herta is Lingsha. Now you may be wondering why this character is perfect for the Herta. Actually, the answer is only one, because Lingsha can attack enemies in an area with a very high frequency. Yes, as we know, the Herta has a trace called Alefli Honest, which can provide extra energy when the ally attacks. the more enemies you hit, the more energy you get. Now with the high frequency of Lingsha to attack enemies, making the Herta's energy will surely fill up quickly, right? Okay guys, we've talked about everything about the Herta. Now it's time to talk about the best teammates for the Herta. You can see different team combinations for the Herta on your screen. The Herta is actually a very universal character that can be combined with a variety of character combinations. Unlike Acheron, who needs 2 Nihility characters, the Herta only needs 1 other Erudition character. So the Herta's flexibility is better than Acheron's. Okay guys, maybe that's all for this video. What do you think? If there's anything you want to ask, please write it down in the comments section down below, and don't forget to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video.